think it's a good use of my energy, or I'll leave others to make their own decision, but it's not a good use of my energy to attack like the Sackler family for introducing OxyContin, to attack the current leadership at Boeing or the board at Boeing for the kind of the dishonesty of their actions and the harm they did by undercutting and really gutting the effectiveness of the FAA as a regulatory body.
They were titans of industry, captains of commerce, and some of the wealthiest people on the planet. On paper, they were geniuses, innovators, and leaders. But behind the boardroom doors, behind the glossy investor reports, lay a different story. A story of deception, manipulation, and greed. Corporate fraud isn't just about small lies. It's about bending reality to amass fortunes, to hide losses, and to create illusions so convincing that entire economies can be fooled. And throughout history, some of the richest people in the world have become wealthy not just through skill or innovation, but through fraud. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on some of the largest corporate frauds in history, exploring how greed turned into global scandals, and why these cases reveal not just the limits of human morality, but the fragility of modern finance. The lure of unchecked power. Corporate fraud begins the same way every time, with ambition. A desire not just to succeed, but to dominate. Executives crave power, influence, and wealth. They see opportunities where others see obstacles, and they begin bending rules to maximize gains. The first step is often small: misreporting revenue by a few $1,000,000, stretching projections, hiding liabilities. These initial deceptions are rationalized. We'll fix it later. It's temporary. No one will notice. But small lies grow, and greed multiplies them. As profits are inflated and share prices rise, executives' bonuses, stock options, and personal wealth explode. Suddenly, fraud becomes self-perpetuating because stopping means losing everything. Unchecked power, combined with weak oversight, creates the perfect storm. Corporate boards may be blind, regulators may be slow, and the public may be naive. In this environment, some of the richest scandals in history are born. Enron, when accounting became an illusion. No discussion of corporate fraud would be complete without Enron, the American energy company that became synonymous with deception. In the 1990 seconds, Enron was hailed as a model of innovation. They transformed the energy market, claimed massive profits, and were celebrated on Wall Street. But beneath the surface, the company's financial statements were a house of cards. Enron executives used complex accounting techniques called special purpose entities to hide massive debts off the books. They inflated revenue, misrepresented profits, and painted a picture of a company that was far healthier than reality. Investors poured billions into Enron. Stock prices soared. Executives sold their shares at the peak, while employees invested their pensions, trusting the company's glossy reports. Then, in 2001, the illusion collapsed. Debts became impossible to hide. Investors realized the profits were fabricated. Enron declared bankruptcy, thousands lost their jobs, and billions were wiped out in an instant. The lesson is clear. Fraudulent reporting can create the illusion of unimaginable wealth, but it is always temporary. Greed built on deception eventually collapses under its own weight. Bernie Madoff, the world's largest Ponzi scheme. If Enron was a corporate lie, Bernie Madoff's scheme was pure deception. Madoff, a respected financier, ran the largest Ponzi scheme in history, defrauding investors of over $65 billion. A Ponzi scheme works by paying existing investors with money from new investors, creating the illusion of consistent returns. Madoff promised steady, impressive profits that no legitimate investment could deliver. The scheme thrived for decades. Investors trusted him because he was reputable, because his reports looked real, and because greed blinded them to warning signs. Banks, regulators, and wealthy clients ignored irregularities, lured by the promise of extraordinary returns. When the scheme collapsed in 2008, it wasn't just about lost money. Charities, retirement funds, and entire families were ruined. Madoff went from respected financier to the symbol of corporate fraud. This scandal teaches a simple truth. When greed and trust collide, fraud can reach astonishing scales. And the richer the target, the bigger the fallout. WorldCom, hiding losses in plain sight. WorldCom, a telecommunications giant, provides another stark example. In the early 2000s, executives faced intense pressure to maintain their stock price and investor confidence. Instead of reporting losses, they falsely inflated revenues by billions of dollars. Costs were disguised as capital investments. Profits appeared larger than reality. Auditors were deceived. Analysts were convinced. When the truth came out, WorldCom filed for bankruptcy in 2002, one of the largest in U.S. history at the time. Investors lost tens of billions. Executives were prosecuted. The scandal shook public trust in corporate America and prompted sweeping reforms, including stricter accounting laws and greater regulatory oversight. WorldCom shows how systemic fraud can become invisible if everyone is willing to ignore red flags. The scale of deception wasn't due to one person alone, it required complicity, silence, and manipulation at multiple levels. Tyco, luxury, lies, and executive excess. Corporate fraud doesn't only inflate numbers, it can involve brazen personal enrichment. Tyco International, led by Dennis Kozlowski, in the 1,990 seconds, became a symbol of executive excess. Kozlowski and other executives used company funds to finance luxury lifestyles, including millions spent on art, jewelry, and private parties. They disguised personal expenses as legitimate business costs. Shareholders were misled about executive compensation, profits, and financial health. The company's stock price remained artificially high, and Kozlowski personally profited at the expense of investors. When the fraud was uncovered, Kozlowski and other executives faced prosecution. They were convicted of theft and fraud, and Tyco's reputation was destroyed. The Tyco scandal shows that corporate fraud isn't always about technical accounting tricks, it can be about greed unchecked by oversight. When executives treat a company as their personal ATM, the consequences are massive. How fraud inflates wealth and society pays the price. Corporate fraud is more than a story of rich executives or failed companies. It is a mechanism that creates illusory wealth, distorts markets, and harms the broader economy. When companies lie about profits, investors pour money into overvalued stocks. Employees' pensions and savings are put at risk. Competitors are unfairly disadvantaged. Markets misallocate capital, funding fake success, while ignoring real innovation. The broader effect is a loss of trust. Consumers stop believing in financial institutions. Banks tighten lending. Governments intervene. The economy slows. In extreme cases, corporate fraud can even trigger recessions, as we saw in the early 2000s following the Enron, WorldCom, and Tyco scandals. The public realizes that the system isn't just flawed, it can be manipulated by a few individuals with greed and power. Psychological factors. Why executives take the risk. Why do intelligent, successful executives risk everything for fraud? History shows several common psychological factors. Greed. The desire for wealth and status can overpower ethical considerations. Hubris. Success breeds overconfidence. Leaders believe they can control outcomes, avoid detection, or fix it later. Pressure. Companies often reward short-term gains over long-term stability, incentivizing manipulation. Normalization of deception. Once small lies are tolerated, larger ones become easier. When these factors combine with weak oversight or lax regulations, the result is a corporate environment ripe for fraud. Executives rationalize their actions as necessary, inevitable, or justified, often underestimating the eventual consequences. Regulatory failures and oversight gaps. Corporate fraud doesn't happen in a vacuum. It thrives where oversight is weak. Many of the world's largest scandals involved regulatory failures. Auditors ignored red flags. Boards failed to ask tough questions. Analysts and journalists accepted company statements at face value. In Enron's case, auditors and financial advisors enabled deception through conflicts of interest. At Madoff's firm, regulators repeatedly failed to investigate credible warnings. These gaps show that fraud is rarely just about the individual, it is a systemic problem. Companies are embedded in a network of oversight, and when that network fails, Extraordinary wealth can be built on lies. Lessons from history, prevention, and awareness. The history of corporate fraud offers critical lessons. Transparency is vital. Investors, employees, and regulators must demand clear, verifiable information. Checks and balances matter. Independent audits, robust boards, and whistleblower protections reduce risk. Skepticism saves money. Extraordinary returns often indicate extraordinary risk. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Corporate culture shapes behavior. Companies that reward ethics and long-term thinking are less likely to experience fraud. Learning from these scandals isn't just academic. It protects ordinary people from losing savings, pensions, and financial security. It also prevents temporary illusions of wealth from creating catastrophic economic consequences. The modern era, fraud in today's world. Corporate fraud hasn't disappeared. It has evolved. In the age of technology, new avenues for deception have emerged. Financial engineering and complex derivatives can hide losses. Cryptocurrency schemes promise huge returns with minimal regulation. Social media hype can manipulate stock prices. Even today, regulators, investors, and employees must remain vigilant. Fraud may no longer require a mansion and an art collection, but it still creates the same effects: illusory wealth, market distortions, and eventual collapse. History proves one thing: fraud is cyclical. Society may learn temporarily, but greed and ambition ensure the cycle continues. Greed, deception, and the true cost of wealth. Corporate fraud teaches a sobering truth. Some of the wealthiest individuals in the world didn't create their empires through innovation, hard work, or skill alone. They built them through deception, manipulation, and sometimes criminal activity. But the consequences go far beyond individual gain. Investors lose billions. Employees lose jobs and pensions. Entire industries are destabilized. Public trust in corporations and markets is shattered. The richest scandals in history are lessons in human behavior, oversight failure, and the destructive power of unchecked ambition. They remind us that wealth can be temporary, power can be illusory, and fraud always leaves a trail of victims. The question isn't whether fraud exists, it always does. The real question is, what will we do to prevent it? Because every new scandal begins with the same temptation, the same human flaw, and the same opportunity to deceive. And until we address those forces, the cycle will continue, creating new billionaires, new scandals, and new victims over and over again. The story of corporate fraud isn't just about money, it's about human psychology, systems of power, and the eternal struggle between ambition and ethics. The lesson is simple. Wealth built on lies may look impressive, but it is always fragile. And the higher it rises, the more spectacularly it falls.